several nations are on the brink of collapse due to political instability, economic crises, conflict, and humanitarian disasters. Countries like Afghanistan, Venezuela, and Yemen face severe challenges, including corruption, poor governance, and external interference, pushing them toward potential failure. This brief overview highlights the critical factors driving these countries' instability. Number 10. Libya's collapse is driven by political fragmentation, with rival governments and militias vying for control since the fall of Gaddafi in 2011. The country is plagued by armed groups, foreign interference from powers like Turkey and Russia, and a reliance on oil, which has led to economic instability due to frequent production disruptions. Efforts at peace and unifying the government have repeatedly failed, resulting in a humanitarian crisis with widespread displacement and deteriorating public services. Without a stable government or disarmament of militias, Libya remains trapped in a cycle of conflict and instability. Number 9. Myanmar. Largely due to the military coup in February 2021, which overthrew the democratically elected government and plunged the country into political chaos. The military junta's seizure of power sparked widespread protests, leading to violent crackdowns and an ongoing civil war between the military and ethnic armed groups, as well as newly formed resistance forces. The economy has sharply declined, with sanctions, inflation, and instability crippling growth. Ethnic conflicts, long-standing before the coup, have worsened, and international intervention has been limited. The humanitarian crisis has deepened, with millions displaced, widespread human rights abuses, and a healthcare system in collapse. Number 8. South Sudan. South Sudan's collapse stems from ongoing internal conflict, ethnic violence, and political instability since gaining independence in 2011. A civil war that broke out in 2013 between forces loyal to President Salva Kiir and his former deputy, Riek Machar, caused immense destruction, leading to the deaths of hundreds of thousands and displacing millions. Although peace agreements have been signed, they remain fragile, with violence continuing between rival factions. The country suffers from extreme poverty, food insecurity, and underdeveloped infrastructure. Ethnic tensions, weak governance, and a struggling economy, heavily dependent on oil, have deepened the humanitarian crisis, leaving South Sudan in a state of prolonged instability. Number 7. Somalia. The country has been plagued by ongoing violence from militant groups like Al-Shabaab, which controls large parts of southern Somalia and regularly conducts terrorist attacks. Clan-based rivalries, corruption, and a lack of effective central authority have further destabilized the nation. Somalia also faces severe economic challenges, widespread poverty, and frequent droughts, leading to food insecurity and humanitarian crises. Despite international efforts to stabilize the country, Somalia remains deeply fragmented, with a fragile government unable to fully control its territory or provide basic services. Number 6. Sudan. Sudan's collapse is driven by internal conflict, political instability, and economic hardship, exacerbated by the power struggle between military factions following the ousting of longtime dictator Omar al-Bashir in 2019. In 2023, intense fighting erupted between the Sudanese Armed Forces, SAF, and the Paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF, causing widespread destruction and displacing millions. The conflict has paralyzed the government, leading to a collapse in basic services, infrastructure, and the economy. Sudan also faces severe humanitarian challenges, including food shortages, displacement, and lack of medical care, worsened by international isolation and sanctions. Ethnic tensions, resource disputes, and the power vacuum have left Sudan on the brink of full collapse, with no resolution in sight. Number 5. Lebanon's collapse is driven by a severe economic crisis, political paralysis, and social unrest. Since 2019, the country has faced one of the worst financial collapses in modern history, with its currency losing over 90% of its value, widespread poverty, and hyperinflation. Corruption and sectarian divisions within the government have prevented meaningful reforms, leaving the country without a functioning government for extended periods. The 2020 Beirut port explosion further devastated infrastructure and public trust. Lebanon also struggles with an overwhelmed healthcare system, energy shortages, and the burden of hosting over 1 million Syrian refugees. This combination of factors has pushed Lebanon toward a state of near-total collapse, with the population suffering from widespread deprivation and uncertainty. Number 4. Haiti. Since the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse in 2021, the country has been without effective leadership, with no functioning parliament or legitimate government. Armed gangs control large parts of the capital, Port-au-Prince, and terrorize civilians, further destabilizing the nation. Haiti's economy is in crisis, with high inflation, unemployment, and extreme poverty affecting much of the population. Additionally, recurring natural disasters like earthquakes and hurricanes have devastated infrastructure and worsened the humanitarian crisis. With minimal international support and a lack of functioning institutions, Haiti remains on the brink of total collapse, leaving its population in extreme suffering. Number 3. Yemen's collapse is the result of a prolonged civil war, severe humanitarian crisis, and economic devastation. The conflict, which began in 2015, pits the Iran-backed Houthi rebels against the Saudi-led coalition supporting the internationally recognized government. This war has fractured the country and led to widespread destruction, displacing millions and causing the deaths of hundreds of thousands. Yemen's economy has collapsed, with severe shortages of food, fuel, and basic supplies, leading to what the UN calls one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world. Number 2. Venezuela's collapse is driven by a severe economic crisis, political instability, and widespread social unrest. Once one of Latin America's wealthiest countries, Venezuela has experienced a dramatic decline due to years of mismanagement, corruption, and reliance on oil revenues. Hyperinflation, widespread poverty, food and medicine shortages, and the collapse of public services have led millions of Venezuelans to flee the country in search of better opportunities. The government, led by President Nicolas Maduro, faces international sanctions and is accused of authoritarianism, human rights abuses, and electoral manipulation. Number 1. Afghanistan's collapse is largely due to the Taliban's return to power in August 2021, following the withdrawal of US and NATO forces. The Taliban takeover plunged the country into political and economic instability, reversing years of progress in governance, education, and human rights. Afghanistan's economy has severely deteriorated, with international sanctions, frozen assets, and the loss of foreign aid leading to widespread poverty, food insecurity, and a collapsing healthcare system. Humanitarian conditions have worsened, with millions facing hunger and displacement. The Taliban's repressive rule, particularly its restrictions on women's rights and freedoms, has further isolated the country from the international community. In conclusion, countries like Afghanistan, Venezuela, and Yemen face severe crises that threaten their stability. Addressing these challenges will require both internal reforms and international support to prevent further collapse and promote recovery.